Hello and welcome back to Cowlitz River Restoration. This is Sarah and I'm going to be your host today. Today we are going to be going over how I refinished this coffee table. Now this coffee table belongs to a client of mine, so it's not my furniture, and they want it to be very farmhouse and shabby chic, and I'm going to do my very best to do that for them. So I began by sanding down the top of this coffee table with a 150 grit sandpaper. I thought at first that maybe I would do the top and the sides, but because I did the side a little bit and realized that it's a laminate overlay, that I am just going to go ahead and refinish that laminate top to give it more of a rustic wood look, and then I'll paint the sides. I have to be really careful when I'm sanding over this laminate because I don't want to go all the way through and expose that particle board underneath. So I'm going really lightly with that 150 on a lower setting, and then I went over it again with a 220 grit, again super lightly, just to buff it out and make it really nice and smooth so that I can refinish that laminate. After I got it all sanded, I've got to clean it really well before I do my stain. The stain that I put on this was called English Chestnut. I always wear gloves when I'm doing staining because I get it all over my hands and I'm positive it's not good for my skin. So I use the dip and wipe method with this stain. I just dip in an old rag and then I wipe it on, dip and wipe, dip and wipe, dip and wipe, to get this completely saturated all over the whole piece. And then I go with the wood grain so that it has more of a natural look. After I was done and it was dried, I decided to go ahead and poly it. I used a satin water-based poly and a sponge brush, and with the grain again, I polyed the whole top to make sure that it was nice and durable, because it's a coffee table, so I want them to be able to use it. And this stuff works, so water-based poly. Now I'm going to clean up the entire base in preparation for paint, because you want to have a really nice clean surface. The cleaner that I am using is a mixture of white vinegar and water and a little bit of Dawn dish soap, and I use that to wipe down a lot of my furniture. At the same time as I am wiping everything down, I'm also removing all of the hardware, and here you can kind of see what I meant when I said that the top pops up. I am changing out the knobs on this piece, so after I got done cleaning it, I took that plastic wood putty and I filled all of the knob holes because I'm going to be using new hardware. I just use my finger to apply it. Sometimes this stuff can get kind of dry, and then I'll just mix a little water in and that does the trick. It also dries really fast, so once it was dried, I just went over all of the areas that I had filled with a 220 grit sander or sandpaper, and then of course that leaves dust, and I want it to be nice and clean for my paint, so I cleaned it up. I used a chalk paint by Rust-Oleum and a linen white. I did 3 coats actually to make sure that I had really good coverage. I used a wood stir brush, an angle brush, to do all along the top edges so that I could get a really nice clean line around the top. I decided to use tape on the inside so that I didn't have to do as much cutting in. So I just used this painter's tape all along the edge as close as I could get, so that in that area I could just slap the paint on and not have to worry about trying to cut in another spot. Of course, I'm going to use that same paint for the base as well. I decided to pull out a different brush this time, and I'm using a chalk paint brush that I got off of Amazon. And I believe, no, this is not the first time that I've used a chalk brush. This was the second time, because I used one on another piece and I thought that it worked pretty well. So I'm like, you know what, I'm going to use it on this piece too. So I did. I used my chalk brush on all of the drawer faces and everywhere that I could get to. There were some places where there were some pretty tight fits that I couldn't quite get my chalk brush into, and you will see what I used instead. like I said, I had to use a different painting technique in the areas that were a little too tight. So I actually pulled out a sponge roller so that I could reach that space between the top drawer and the bottom drawer. There's actually a little basket that goes in there, but I still want there to be a clean paint job all the way through. So I used that roller to get into those spots. And like I said, I ended up doing 3 coats, like 2 coats full, and then a 3rd coat just to go through and touch up and make sure that there wasn't any place where I had not enough coverage. Then they wanted it to be really shabby chic, so I used a 150 grit sandpaper to just really scuff out around the edges. It was one of those things where I went around and scuffed out all the edges, and then I went back around and scuffed it a little bit more just to give it a really like weathered, shabby, aged feel. I found in areas that I wanted a little bit more distress, I could go back and forth with the sandpaper, and that would give almost a more natural distressed look. After I was done, I brought this back inside, and I wasn't really happy with how the top looked. I just didn't like how the stain took. I thought it looked kind of blotchy in certain lights, so I decided to do a black wash on it. And a black wash for me basically means I take some watered down black paint. In this situation, I'm using a flat black Rust-Oleum latex paint. I watered it down, and I'm taking a paintbrush and I'm getting the tips of my paintbrush kind of damp and wet with the product, and then I swipe it on, and then I use a damp rag, and then I wipe it off. And I do that over and over again until I get the texture that I'm looking for. Sometimes I will even get the tabletop a little damp first with my damp rag and then put the product on. See, because you really want it to be watered down. I don't want it to be real heavy. It's just enough to give it a little bit of variation in the wood grain. I feel like I sound super monotone. I promise it's not that I'm not excited about this piece. I'm super stoked with how it turned out. The clients absolutely loved it. I'm walking you through how I did it, but I'm literally like 4 pieces behind on my tutorials. My kids are out of school for the summer. I've got all these projects just like piling up, and I'm really tired tonight, and I'm trying to do this voiceover so I can get it out to you. But anyways, so because it's so thin, it dries fast. So an hour or 2 hours, it's ready for poly. And I use the same satin poly that I used to seal it before. I use a sponge brush, I go in the same direction as the wood grain, and I get that top all sealed up so it'll be nice and durable for my client. Do watch for hairs while it's still wet. You can always like stick your finger down and like swirl it around, get that hair out, and then like smooth it out. But it's not great to try to get hairs out of the poly afterwards, so keep an eye out for that. Now that the top is where I want it and the base is nice and painted and distressed, I am ready to seal, and I'm going to use this bare, clear finishing wax to seal this piece. I'm a big fan of this wax. I've used it for a long time. It's got some good durability as far as the things that I've used it on, and it's easy to come by. You can find it at the Home Depot. I like it really well with the bare chalk paints. I kind of switch back and forth between this and the Best Dang Wax by Dixie Belle. I did use the bare on this one, and it's just kind of like tried and true wax. It works really well. I used a wax brush to put it on. When you're applying wax, you want to put it on almost like you would a lotion. You really like want to work it into your product. You don't just put a layer on and leave it. You've got to like almost massage it into the paint to really get it to blend in. On the areas that I couldn't fit my wax brush, I just used a lint-free cloth, or you could even use like an old cotton shirt, and I dipped into the wax and then I rubbed it in and massaged that wax into those nooks and crannies. Then on all the places that I could actually reach, I went ahead and used my wax brush. On areas where I do use my wax brush, I like to go over it with my lint-free rag anyhow, just to make sure that I get off any excess so that it dries faster. I get so much satisfaction from peeling away painter's tape. Like, it brings me absolute joy. So, and also putting in the baskets at the end, that was wonderful. So my husband helped me in putting on these new knobs. He is so amazing. His name is Austin, and he makes lots of guest appearances in my channel. So if you like Austin, stay tuned because you're going to see lots more of him. We work together a lot in hardware and in situations where more muscle is involved. These knobs are cool in the fact that you just screw them to the front of the drawer or whatever you're wanting to put it onto. I got these knobs off of Amazon.com, and I believe they're called library knobs because you can actually slip things inside to label them. They're like label knobs. But anyways, this is my after. I refinished this really cool table to match it, and they really like that too, so they bought both of them. And there's the top, looks so much better, has a really cool farmhouse shabby chic vibe. I hope you enjoyed my tutorial. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye.